This
Okay.
conference will now be recorded.
Okay. The September 18th meeting of the Planning Commission which is a joint meeting with the City Council. And I'm chairing. I see Stephen is here remotely, but I'm going to chair the meeting tonight. So can we have the roll call?
Commissioner Burkholder, Commissioner Cable, Commissioner Campbell,
Here.
Commissioner Foster, Commissioner Howard,
Here.
Commissioner Lowry, Commissioner Spiegel, Commissioner Tangeman. Counselor Belts. Counselor Carey,
Here.
Counselor Lopez,
Present.
Counselor McKeel. Here. Counselor Oberst,
Yes.
Counselor Salinas Oliveros. Here. Mayor Coons.
I'm present. And Phyllis, did you get our new planning commissioner?
No, because his name wasn't on my list.
I know. I'd like to introduce everyone
Commissioner-
to Isaac Winiger, our new
Commissioner Winiger, would you like to say you're present?
I'm present.
Okay.
Okay, we have a couple of housekeeping things to do for the Planning Commission, then we'll get into our work session. There's a set of minutes from our September 4th meeting. Are there any changes or additions to the minutes?
I move to approve them as read, as written.
Second?
I'll second.
I don't know if you can.
Never mind, I'm not going to second.
I'll second it.
Holly's going to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Nice try. Karen.
Wow. I run a tight meeting here. So all those in favor of approving the minutes as submitted, say aye. And we do have a new planning commissioner tonight. Welcome, Isaac. Do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background.
My name is Isaac Winiger, and yes, I lived in town here most of my life. And my current job, I work over with the state. I'm a project portfolio manager, and I've been doing that maybe about 15 years and working on different statewide projects. I'm in the CO office currently, and I'm glad to be able to volunteer and be involved in our community development here and see what this is all about. So I'll have a lot to learn and new acronyms and a lot of other things going on. So thank you.
Welcome. Welcome.
Can I remind everybody to please pull the microphone close to you when you talk, all of you? Because I know some of you are pretty soft-spoken. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is for items that are not on the agenda. If there's any public comment, I don't see anybody here that is likely to have any public comment other than what's on the agenda. So I think we can just move forward to our work session on the economic opportunities analysis work session. Are you going to introduce?
Yeah, I'll do a little brief introduction. Thank you, Commissioner, and good evening, Planning Commissioners and City Council. It's great to have you all together here tonight for, we just have one agenda item to have with you tonight on the economic opportunities analysis. This is our first meeting as a joint work session. We've actually had one as a project advisory committee, but this will be a real nice introduction to the project. It'll explain what an economic opportunities analysis is, kind of why we're doing it, and lay out the roadmap for where we hope to go with the project over the next 6 to 8 months. So Just real briefly, the consultants online are gonna go into more detail in their PowerPoint presentation that was included in your packet. But if you think about this plan, this economic opportunities analysis, broadly speaking, it's the economics element of our comprehensive plan. So this is our 20-year plan for growth and development on economic job growth and the types of industries that we want to see in Monmouth. And we're planning for a 20-year planning horizon. So this is the long range part of planning work that we do. So it's a really important document. It will help us answer the questions: do we have enough land for that economic growth over the next 20 years inside of our UGB, or do we need to do some kind of growth boundary expansion to accommodate more land? And then is the land zoned appropriately for the types of businesses that we want to attract and see in Monmouth? So the last time we did one of these was in 2008. So for a 20-year plan, we're due, because usually you get in and you update these every 10 to 15 years. So we were fortunate enough to get some grant funding from the state of Oregon, specifically their Department of Land Conservation Development. We'll start in with the acronyms already, DLCD. So very grateful to them for providing us some funding so that we can hire professional consultants that do this for a living to help guide us through the process and make sure that we're meeting all the various rules and regulations that govern these types of projects. So yes. Oh, a little bit. Okay, too close. Alrighty. Usually I'm the opposite. Oh, okay. I will. Yeah, it's challenging, but so with that, I would like to introduce our project consultants. We've hired Johnson Economics. I can see Brendan Buckley is on the call. There's a wave there. And looks like Andrew Parrish is also there as well. So welcome to you both. And we're fortunate to have this firm. They have done previous work in Monmouth. For those of you that were involved in the housing needs analysis, they helped us through the housing side of this planning process. So it's great to have consultants that are familiar with Monmouth and what some of our issues are specifically. So with that, looks like we've already made Brendan the presenter, and Brendan, feel free to take it away.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Nice to be here with you this evening and introduce the project to you. My name is Brendan Buckley. I'm a project manager at Johnson Economics. As Suzanne referred to, we've worked on a lot of these across the state. We've done these types of economic studies for all types of cities in every part of the state, and we have previous experience in Monmouth, and we're excited to be able to help again. I have much more detail coming on sort of what these projects are, but first I'll ask Andrew to introduce himself.
All right, thank you. Good evening. I'm Andrew Parrish. I work for a firm called MIG. We often partner with Johnson Economics to do some of the mapping and kind of inventory side of this work.
Thank you. Okay, so hopefully you can all see the screen here. I've was just experimenting with it, and I found out that I can't really make the presentation blow up to the entire screen and still see the GoToMeeting app. So I think what I'll do is perhaps go ahead and make the presentation go full screen, and I'll have to check back occasionally to see if there's to see if there's hands up or anything like that, or you can try to flag me down and let me know. Thanks. So we're here to talk about the economic opportunities analysis tonight. We have done some introductions. I want to get through a project overview, talk about what these types of studies are, what our approach is, what the approach to the land inventory is. Andrew will talk about that. And then hopefully have some time to get into some discussion of underlying economic goals and objectives that kind of are the foundation of this type of project and what our analysis needs to be based on ultimately. So what is an EOA? So an EOA is really a process of looking at the remaining employment lands that the community has. That's lands that are zoned either for commercial use or industrial use, and doing an inventory of how many of those lands are left, and then doing a forecast, a 20-year forecast of how much we estimate job growth will be and the types of lands and specific sites that that growth will need. And then we do a comparison between our forecasted 20-year need and the remaining inventory, and figure out what that says to us. Is the inventory sufficient to accommodate what we are projecting, or is it not going to be sufficient? Or perhaps there's the proper amount of acreage, but it's not in the right type of sites, and so on and so forth. So those are all the issues that we're trying to get at through this process. Once we get to findings, hopefully this is going to lead to some new ideas for tools and strategies and policies that can be adopted into the comprehensive plan, chapter 9, regarding the community's economic development programs and initiatives. So I did want to quickly mention the project advisory committee that we have set up for this. So we have a committee set up to check in with it periodically on this project. We've met with them once. We're going to meet with them again next week. And this is a group of stakeholders and representatives in sort of relevant areas. So either in economic development or perhaps commercial real estate, or local industries, or just local residents and employees. So we're trying to get a group of interests together who can advise us along the way and give their feedback on our findings and analysis. They're going to advise us on objectives as well, which we're hoping to talk to you guys about. And they will be reviewing our work products periodically as we do finish our interim products. So this process is fairly straightforward. We'd start with sort of economic employment trends analysis and a forecast of demand. That's what we work on or focus on at Johnson Economics. And then at the same time, the commercial and industrial buildable lands inventory is going on. That's an inventory of your current lands, and MIG takes the lead on that. So all those things go together into the economic opportunities analysis report, which is kind of the final product of this process. And then that adopted report can lead into updates to the comprehensive plan and also adoption of new strategies and tools if the community decides to do that. Our timeline right now is we are working we're on pace right now to get our initial forecasts and BLI done in the next month and a half or so, hopefully around the end of October, and then we'll be going into talking about implementation policies and procedures. We'd like to come back and talk with you guys at that time. That might be around December. And then getting into the new year is about finalizing documents and going through the adoption process. We have a public outreach plan and schedule. So beyond what we're doing to meet with the advisory committee, check in with you guys, staff is also leading efforts to do a survey of the community and look at other ways to get word out about this effort and hopefully draw more feedback from the community along the way so that we get as broad-based amount of feedback as we can get. So what are the components of an EOA? Basically, the sort of is a look at almost the table of contents of what the final report will be. But you start with talking about economic goals and objectives. What is it that the community is looking to achieve? And that should be the basis of the rest of the analysis and report. Then we do local, state, and national economic trends. We talk about local target industries, and that's going to be, again, part of the process that we'll be getting feedback on. What would the community like to see? What has been strong historically, but what maybe what you might not have as much representation of right now, but would like to see more of in the future. All those issues we'll be talking through. And then we do a forecast of the job growth, translate that into land need, and then compare that to the land inventory. The forecast methodology, so what we'll be doing to come up with an estimate of 20-year demand for employment land is we're going to start by estimating 20-year job growth. So there are a couple of ways that the state rules allow us to choose growth rates to use in this process. They aren't required, but there are a couple places to get started. So one is the sub-market forecast from the Oregon Employment Department. So that's a state forecast that they do by region. The region goes beyond just Monmouth and in fact includes multiple counties around Polk County. So so it's a larger forecast, but it does have a breakdown of what the state forecasts job growth will be in different industry sectors. So we can apply that. Or the second choice is to look at the estimated population growth forecast, which Portland State University's Population Research Center does periodically for every community in the state, including Monmouth. So those are the two sort of starting lines, I would say. And you can see here on this slide that they are quite a bit different. So the state jobs forecast for the broader region, which includes Monmouth, is a little under 1% per year. And the population growth forecast from PSU, if we were to use that, is 1.6% per year. So if you're, applying those on an annual basis over 20 years, the difference can be is going to end up being quite stark at the end of 20 years. So that will give us a wide range to look at and talk about. But really, that's just a starting point. And generally, with any community, we're going to get into an adjusted growth forecast, meaning we don't want to just take these numbers from these other sources and apply them, just apply them blindly. What we'd like to do is through this process, talk about your goals and your target industries and make sure that those are reflected in the adjusted growth forecast so that you get something that the community really would like to see. And through this Goal 9 economic lands process, you have more leeway via the state rules to be more aspirational and talk about what you'd really like to achieve. This is a little bit different, in contrast, I should say, to the housing needs process, which some of you might remember, which is really a little more prescribed. They tell you kind of how you have to do it. There's a little more leeway with this. So that's what can tend to make this process a little more fun and a little more enjoyable for the community, I think. So there are different ways that we're going to go about talking about target industries. We look at a few different indicators to sort of help give some background information. The types of things we look at are the industry sectors that are strong in the community now, the ones that have been growing quickly relative to perhaps national or state trends, the ones that already have a large share of your local employment that are highly represented, and those types of indicators for what's strong now what may be strong in the future. And then we'll add to that your sort of the personal thoughts of you folks about other industries that you would like to consider target industries, even if they're not necessarily strongly represented now. Quick overview of how we convert our jobs forecast, 20-year jobs forecast and need. We come up with estimates of jobs by sector. We come up with estimates of type of real estate those industries use, commercial versus industrial, and the amount of square footage they need for that number of employees. And we kind of convert that to an estimate of the types of land or the amount of land for both commercial and industrial that the community needs. And then we do additional analysis on the size of remaining sites. So a big issue for many communities is the lack of large or even medium-sized sites for industrial or commercial users. Perhaps you've got quite a bit of land left, but it's all on very small sites, or 5 acres or less. And so then we can talk about what are the actual site needs for the types of industries we've identified and the community would like to see. So that's an overview of the 20-year demand side, so land demand. And now we're going to get into talking about how the supply side is done and how we look at the buildable inventory. And I'll turn it over to Andrew to talk about that.
I'm sorry there. This is Councilor Lopez attending online. I'm having significant trouble hearing. I think we're getting quite a bit of feedback from a microphone on in the chambers. Could somebody please check on that before we proceed?
Chris, I checked on it. I don't know where the control is to turn the speakers down. Perhaps the speakers themselves could talk a little softer. I don't know what to do.
I think all you need to do is mute any mics that are unmuted in the room. I think that's what's capturing the feedback.
I believe it's more the speakers in the room are bouncing off the walls and creating the feedback.
Yeah, Chris, both last night and today, you've been really loud in the chambers when you've spoken. So, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, last night there weren't any issues with feedback, even when others online were speaking. It seems to be something unique to the situation tonight. Even if it was loud in the chamber, if microphones were muted, there'd be nothing to pick it up. If it can't be remedied, that's okay, but it would be great to be able to hear this wonderful presentation a little more clearly.
Thank you. Have I been speaking more loudly than I need to? Am I being super loud?
For me, I don't believe it's the volume. I believe it's the feedback, but I couldn't speak to what they're experiencing in the room.
Okay.
Yeah, they're looking into it, so we'll take a second here and see if we can determine anything.
Okay.
If there's somebody managing the stream computer on the GoToMeeting, you might be able to just mute it on the software side. And then we'll take kind of a break after a couple of slides here and folks can comment as needed.
And I certainly don't mean to be the sticky wicket here, but having the audio clear, I think will be a benefit for all that look back on the presentation as well.
The room might be muted now because looks like maybe you're speaking, but I can't hear
Yeah.
you. But
No,
is the
I
feedback
see that the
gone?
room is muted now, and yeah, the feedback's totally gone. So
Okay.
I will just talk briefly about the supply side of this analysis. So we're looking at the land that's available in the city to meet some of this forecasted employment growth. This is a typical process that we use for communities in Oregon. We start with all the land in the urban growth boundary. We take out land that's zoned for residential uses, zoned or has a comprehensive plan designation for residential uses. Other non-employment uses like churches, publicly owned facilities, things that we don't want to rely on for future employment land. And then we're left with everything that is a designated employment in the city, and we'll remove land that is currently developed or is committed for public facilities. I think the university is the big one to talk about in the city there. We are left with either vacant properties that might have some infill capacity, we call those partially vacant, or properties that might be redevelopable based on either a screen of improvement value or just plans that folks know about that certain properties in certain areas are up for redevelopment. We'll take out resources like wetlands, floodplains, steep slopes, etc. And we're left with unconstrained land on this vacant and redevelopable employment land in the city, and we're left with net buildable acres. And that is the employment land supply for the purposes of this economic opportunities analysis. What's left after that is, maybe some of this land has infrastructure constraints. You can't really serve it with water, sewer, roads. Maybe there are property owner, willingness to sell, willingness to redevelop that we need to identify. And then there's market drivers. Maybe it doesn't pencil based on what the zoning is for some of these sites currently. So those are all things that are outcomes of the analysis, and the goal of this work is to develop strategies to overcome these barriers and open land for redevelopment. And then after, basically after this is documented, you can start to look at, well, maybe there's a need for something outside the current urban growth boundary if we don't have the land to meet the documented need. And so, yeah, we use comprehensive plan designations as a kind of the base of where we start from. We know there's been a couple of changes to certain properties in the city since this map was prepared, and I've been working on a draft buildable lands inventory that we will bring to the advisory committee next week. Was there anything else you wanted to say about that, Brendan?
No, that's about it. I put the map up here just to familiarize everyone sort of where your employment lands are. I'm sure most of you are familiar, but the pink here is your commercial land, the gray is your remaining industrial land. And so that's kind of the general layout of what we're looking at and talking about what's remaining in those areas. It's fairly constrained.
Yeah,
so,
and I'll just add briefly the one thing you don't see on this map is floodplains and wetlands, and we know a lot of the industrial land, particularly in the north, has significant kind of floodplain impacts, we'll say. And so what our assumptions are for how developable that land is, we'll have a big we'll have a lot to say for what we think is actually buildable in those areas. So yeah, we can leave this map on the screen maybe briefly, and just ask folks in the room and folks online if there are any questions or comments so far.
not seeing or hearing any. If anyone in the room is trying to get our attention, we're kind of looking at the dais right now. So I guess just let us know if we if anyone has a question or comment, really on anything that we've presented so far. So talking mostly about methodology so far. Okay.
Go ahead.
They can't see us. Okay,
Go
thank
ahead,
you,
Rebecca.
Commissioner. So my question, and maybe you went over this or it's obvious, but on page 12, where you see the net buildable acres and it's highlighted, is that where we want to be at a certain time? Is that where we're at? Is that the goal? So I don't know why it's highlighted, I guess, or bolded.
Yeah, that is there to, that's kind of the end result of the inventory, I guess is why that's highlighted. We're looking for a reasonable guess at what the net buildable acres of employment land are, and we separate that out by the type of sites and the zoning and et cetera. But things that are further below there are things that are kind of more policy oriented. So the inventory itself doesn't really address those, but the EOA more broadly does.
Great, thank you.
Bill, did you have a comment? Stephen, did you have a comment?
I did have a methodology question. Some of our recent code changes allow for commercial uses in residential zones, and we have a small amount, and we also, I guess that's more the point of my question is I'm wondering how those sorts of policies factor into a net buildable acres number, since it's primarily residential land, but we make it possible for people to develop small commercial applications there.
Yeah, I can take a first shot at that, and Brendan can add. I think it oftentimes will treat something like that in a similar way as we treat middle housing in a housing analysis. It's allowed lots of places. It's probably not going to happen lots of places. So we'll probably look at the on the demand side, is there a significant demand that we're seeing for small commercial uses? If so, then it certainly makes sense that some of that's going to get taken up by land in residential areas. But I think it would be unrealistic for us to say a whole lot of residential land is going to turn commercial. But I think we need to kind of balance that with what the demand side is looking like.
It sounds like there's a certain burden of proof in order to count some of that land. That makes sense. Thanks.
That's basically our recent experience with mixed use zones is that DLCD kind of wants us to be as realistic as possible. And that can be tricky if you haven't actually seen any commercial development in those zones yet, because you don't even have a baseline. But that's something we can talk about along the way. Usually for those things, if we have an assumption that some of it, maybe commercial development, that assumption ends up being quite modest. It's generally just kind of a little change on the margin and not a huge impact. Is there?
Yeah, Councilor Lopez here. Building on Commissioner Howard's question, I think I'd be more interested in the strategies to overcome barriers in that area, right? So if we know that it's allowed, and maybe that mixed use commercial isn't something that's often taken advantage of, I think as the output of this, and then the next steps, some advice and strategies on how we could encourage that, and how we could encourage that, in ways that will be, thoughtful and not just saying throw it anywhere as well.
Okay, I'm going now.
Great, thank you. That's the kind of thing that will be the topic at the in the sort of implementation strategies phase of this project to talk about those kind of
Okay,
things
on
for sure.
page 10, we're talking about target industries, identifying the target industries, both local economic development goals, national, state, and regional trends. I was wondering what type of studies have been done when you are looking into identifying these target industries that also match up with the cost of living in Monmouth Independence area, Polk County, and what their pay scales are going to be, or what those workers will be able to realize from their jobs. I think it's super important that we keep people here, that people can live and work in the same community. They spend their money here. That's economic growth. So I was wondering what studies have been done so that you can use that to help identify the target industries.
It's a great question. So I to make sure I understand, you're emphasizing the need to have jobs in those industries that have sort of family supportive wages and wage levels that are high enough to support residents to both live and work in town. Is that, am I?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, certainly. That's something that we'll talk about. We look at the relative wage levels of the different industries as we get into target industries. There are some communities, for instance, we're doing work on the coast recently, and they said, we've got a ton of employment in the tourism industries and in retail, and the wages aren't necessarily excellent for affording housing on the coast. And so they said, we don't really want to talk about those as targets. We know we're going to have that type of employment, but that's not necessarily a target for us. And we should go through the same process and same considerations for Monmouth, and really think about those types of industries that might bring in the higher wages.
Thank you.
Go ahead. John Kerry here, member of the City Council. And you're likely aware of this already, but we have done the housing needs analysis, and we've got it, which you were involved with, and we're trying to launch some affordable housing initiatives, which sort of speaks to Holly's concerns. But we're also involved with a transportation study, updating our transportation plan. And so the degree to which we can, and they are working sort of autonomously at the moment. And so the degree to which you guys can derive what the transportation plan is working towards, and they can be cognizant of what you're working on, I think we'd have a more coherent overall and comprehensive development plan. So just putting that in your ear, people in the room are, if they weren't, they are now aware of that. And so we'll sort of work on our end, but if you could plug that into some of your considerations as well, how we can influence the transportation to help the economic development.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's a very good point. And city staff obviously very involved in all these projects, and hopefully will help us with bridging those gaps and making sure that we know what each other are doing.
Yeah, just off the top of my head, I think the forecasts that are part of the transportation plan are something that we should probably be at least aware of, what they're using. They might be required to use certain things by the state, but we should get a sense of what that is. And then from a policy standpoint, if there are any new ideas for walkable streetscapes for Main Street districts that come out of the transportation plan, I think those can feed directly into this work, depending on the timelines of the projects.
Any other questions or comments at this time? Okay. Well, I guess you can move on with your agenda.
Great, thank you. So what we wanted to talk a little bit about next is the sort of economic development goals of the community and of this group. And get your background thoughts. We don't need to necessarily, adopt a list of things this evening, but we would like to have some discussion on what your goals are and what you see as the particular needs for the community. So where we start as where we've started is by looking at what Monmouth has done thus far or recently regarding economic development planning and goals. And really the last time this process was done, the EOA process, goes back to 2008. That was a long time ago. Obviously, those documents and results are getting well out of date by now. But the community has undertaken a 5-year economic development strategic plan that was adopted in 2021. So that is still fairly recent, and I'm sure many of you were involved in that. And so that actually is an excellent place to start in terms of identifying possible areas of focus for the community, and if those have changed, if they have evolved, or if they still are well representative of what you would like to see. So I was going to do a very quick overview of the broad categories that were included in that 5-year strategic plan. I believe it was included in your packet tonight, so maybe I hope you got a chance to glance through it and kind of refresh your memory a little bit about what's in it. But as a basis to start our conversation, I thought I would just read through some of these. So the main areas of focus were to invest in and promote entrepreneurship, use the city's assets to encourage diverse economic growth, identify and prepare for the economic future, develop a vibrant downtown and commercial areas, expand the economic impact of tourism, and support small business retention. Under each of these, there were a number of strategies identified in the report that you have in your packet, sort of further breaking down ideas on what these things could mean. A number of things were called out as short-term priorities in that plan. Those included develop an economic development response team, invest in city infrastructure to support growth, streamline the reviewing procedures for development, use urban renewal incentives, ensure adequate land supply for new employers, identify challenges and barriers to development, or business growth, and join the Main Street program, which has been accomplished. So those were some of the short-term priorities pulled out in that report. So really, what I would like to do is spend most of the time that we have left talking about some of these things and getting your thoughts on how current you think they are, if you think any of them need to be updated, any thoughts you have that jump out when you're looking at this list or at the strategic plan.
I have just a basic question. Is the list 1 through 6, is it in order of importance via your study or just line item?
I can respond to that.
I don't believe it is. I believe it's in the order that it was in the report. So those are the main sections that were in the 5-year strategic plan.
That's correct.
I have thoughts generally around I feel pretty strongly in alignment with Commissioner Tangeman about the idea of employment opportunities that work well for people who want to live and work here. The other thing that often comes to mind to me is that second point, which is the idea of having a diverse economic base, which can sometimes feel like a struggle in a university town where the gravitational pull of the one employment opportunity is pretty strong. But I also find myself wondering, sort of in our geographic location, what kinds of economic opportunities for other kinds of businesses are practical. And we're not near a major highway. We don't have a big transportation hub of any kind, really. If we're just looking at small retail and dining and so forth to support the community, that doesn't feel like a path to a diverse economic environment. So it's not a direction or a direct question, but it's sort of the parameters that are bouncing around in my head as we consider this next plan.
Thank you. A concern. Sure.
I wanted to draw attention on page 16 to use the city's assets to encourage diverse economic growth. And I'm pretty sure there's not another city in Oregon with a U.S. highway, gigabit internet, and a four-year university. And I would really like us to keep those three factors in mind. We might as well throw in cheap electricity while we're at it too. And these all should be real attractants to certain categories of businesses. And I'm not convinced that we as a city, we as a university and a university town have ever taken those four pieces, wrapped them into a ball, and presented them to potential employers. I think it's important we include that in this process as perhaps our strongest asset that we can offer, and really stress those pieces.
I would agree. We seem to spend a lot of time thinking about downtown when a lot more people see Highway 99. To me, 99 is our biggest asset, maybe instead of the university, but somebody said we have 60,000 cars a day that drive through here.
60 on 99 and another 57 on Highway 51.
Right.
Yeah, we
just need $1 a day from each of them.
Right, and I've always thought of downtown as being for those of us who live here, and that's why it's important to continue to build that. But yeah, 99 for the outside employers.
Great.
I think from the time years ago when I was on a different committee and we talked about bringing in different businesses and what we could do to promote Monmouth, I always have felt that we tend to lean towards the entrepreneurship, which is excellent. And I totally am all about that as a business owner myself, but it doesn't necessarily support the people that are here. The infrastructure support from businesses has to be robust enough for people to want to live here and for businesses to want to come here. And when we start thinking about that on an economic scale for the city of Monmouth, and I'm not saying to take away from mom and pop or individually privately owned eateries or anything else. I'm just saying we need to look at both sides of that and understand that if we're only looking at entrepreneurship or we're putting a lot of our emphasis there and not reaching out to larger commercial entities, then we're missing, I believe, a sector that we need to pay more attention to.
Well, I definitely agree. I find that Commissioner Tangent is saying a lot of great things tonight. It is also a matter of, are there certain industries where the footprint is too big and we wind up being in their gravitational pull rather than the other way around. So while the very small businesses don't employ a lot of people, I think there are probably some industries and businesses that might be too big for a community our size, and finding wherever that middle ground lays would be wise, I think.
It seems like because of the high number of students that are here, that sometimes we're in the businesses for 9 months out of the year. When the students leave, it's kind of difficult for some time. I was interested one time of finding out why people leave to spend money someplace else instead of spending it. Well, what do we not have that they leave to buy? And I had some Oriental kids say bowling.
Well, I go to Salem once a week for bowling. Yeah, so that's, no. Actually, I leave town to go ride my bicycle because the paths in Corvallis, Philomath, Eugene are wonderful. So I leave town to go buy lunch there. It'd be nice if we had that kind of thing, but different topic, transportation plan with that. But I'm wondering if with the changes with AI and software, that we couldn't be looking at bringing in, if there's still the term white collar jobs. I don't know what the current word is for those skilled kind of jobs, where you could provide some jobs for our graduates at Western, but at the same time, you could entice a company to come here for, I think, really the quality of life of Oregon, but not count on having lots of employees that they're going to bring in, because so many jobs now are online. So we could find the sweet spot between, bringing in a company that's going to hire enough of our residents and large enough that would actually be a nice economic boom to our town.
So we need about 100 more Stephen Howards.
See,
I think it'd be hard to get the company I work for to relocate north from where they are right now. Maybe I'll work on it.
So Chris, were you waiting to make a comment? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. When we're talking about what kind of jobs can support families here, and then we're talking about what kind of jobs can bring, or what kind of assets the community needs to build to keep people spending their money here. Those are two really important questions, but I do want to call out that they're not synonymous, right? So oftentimes when we are spending our money, more and more there's been a shift toward spending money in service related fields, right? Things that you're going to go to, because if you're going to buy a blender, most people today are buying a blender on Amazon. That's not really contributing to a local economy unless we're building a distribution center. But when we're talking about things like, and a couple things that came up in the room already, like bowling, people will travel to that, and that's an experience to a certain extent, a service related job. And so, there's a small fraction of those service related jobs that truly truly pay a higher living wage that's going to support a family. And so I do believe that we need to look at the full spectrum of jobs to make this a rich community. Look at, you know, what we're trying to draw as jobs, and then what we're also trying to draw as assets that people would want to be in the community, to engage in the community with. And so there's a couple different facets there, and I want to make sure that we look at each of them and then them together holistically as we draw these next steps.
Thank you. That's a great point. Yeah. So some of the services and amenities you might be looking for may not support the highest paying or family wage jobs, whereas other industries might. So it's important to emphasize that they can be two different things and really two different parallel goals. Yeah, it's an excellent point.
Thank you, Chairman. Rebecca here, and I filled out the survey and I put tons of ideas in there, and I'm just kind of thinking of what we have already, and I think our location is a prime location for businesses. We are close to Portland, close to the beaches, close to Eugene. We have Western, OSU, U of O, Chemeketa, Willamette. I mean, we're surrounded by places where we can help our community be trained for certain industries that could be located here in Monmouth. So I was kind of thinking like some of the, that would provide a living wage. So maybe some of the high-tech type of jobs where you have a computer science, IT, electronics, robotics, things that could help our agriculture community. A lot of our agriculture now is automated, and they need technicians, and they need people in electronics, and they need people who understand robotics and things of that nature. We have Maduri Farms that Chemeketa works with down the street for some of these things, and we could really take advantage of those things and even partner with our university to do that. And those would provide higher wages and higher paying type of employment where we could train up a lot of those who live here. And then what Chris was saying was right too. So I'm thinking of the things that why I leave to go do things. So I leave to go get my oil change. There's nowhere to get my oil change, I don't think, here in town. Oh, Les Schwab. Sorry, Les Schwab. Sorry about that. You know, going to certain, I like Trader Joe's, but really for like things I need, clothing or shoes or things that I can't get in town. And so there's certain things that I was thinking about why I leave. I would love to be able to do all of that here, the things. So those are, there's a lot of things that, we could think about, and maybe some things that are more wants than needs. Car wash would be nice instead of just the one over. I can't wash my car and my driveway. It's just not good for the environment. So like my car's dirty a lot unless I go to Corvallis. So, and that may or may not bring in customers or jobs, but I was also putting down things that I would love that would make my life a little easier. But if we're thinking about industry, we're really moving into high tech and different CTE type of areas that are lacking. And we have we're surrounded by a lot of industry that we're not aware of. And I don't think people really are aware of the agricultural industry and some machining and welding and we're not really thinking about that here. And we're in a prime location to partner. So those were just some of my.
Yeah, and must remember, MyNet is an uncommon asset in this world.
Bill?
All of the things that brought up are important, but one of the things we need to change is the community's attitudes. Now, we used to have a grocery store down the street here, Marketplace, for those who remember. We tried to buy in bulk and present a product that shows we could compete with Costco and Walmart. It didn't go over because that wasn't the people's attitude, that wasn't their mindset for Monmouth. Their mindset was, it's here, but that's not right. And they would go. So we got to change and not only bring people in, we have to change the perception of the people.
Carol?
I'm almost wondering if the days of stores are gone. I mean, my kids send through Amazon, and my son does it so he gets a 2-hour delivery. And, I think if we're looking at places to shop, it's going to be specialty places like antiques or antiques. That's all I can think of, because even clothing is like, my daughter-in-law buys all of her clothes on Amazon, tries them on. If they don't fit, she sends them back through Amazon. And so I think the days, we're watching the malls kind of close down. So I think if we're going to be looking at places where people stay to do things, antiques seem to be a good thing. I don't know. But we also, I think, have already really wonderful restaurants here that I think people come from Salem to eat here. And so I think continuing to attract good restaurants might be a good thing to do, because as when we have those high-tech white-collar jobs, they are going to want to eat out more than they're going to want to cook. So I think continue to focus on good restaurants, I think is good. I kind of just rambled right through that. Sorry, I just need more coffee this evening.
Thank you. Yeah, I just spent a few minutes looking through the top 25 occupations projected to grow here in Oregon, and about 10 of them have to do with medical, speech pathology, respiratory therapists, physical therapists, et cetera, et cetera. So thinking in terms of job growth and what needs to happen, but some of it's also hospitality and leisure. We all know that, the restaurant business, those kinds of things, but some behavioral health. It actually said drivers and chauffeurs will be huge. If we think about our aging population, we have to think in terms of what people's needs are going to be. Vet techs and veterinarians, that was like a 27% projected growth in the need for those positions. So maybe we need to also be looking at what's being projected and how can we attract financial planning too, actually financial and wealth management. We all know as that population ages, they have PERS. PERS tier 1, PERS tier 2, how are they going to be investing that? And so I just think in terms of what we're going to be looking at attracting, we need to look at where's job growth happening, and then how can we attract that, knowing we have very little land. We can't be looking at manufacturing here. So let's look at where job growth is going to happen and how can we attract some of these, not just the education needed, but some of these businesses. When we talk about building a clinic downtown, let's talk about, respiratory therapists, speech therapists, behavioral health in some kind of a clinic environment. I think that's where we need to be thinking as well.
Bill, I want to go back real briefly to your comment in our former grocery store. I do think part of the problem we've still got in town, and it's not anything we're going to solve here tonight, is Highway 99 and how difficult it can be to get across. Oh, it's on. Yeah. Oh. Okay. How hard it is to get across that highway. And we're finally starting to address that, at least for pedestrians and bicycles. It's still a nightmare to get across in a car, though. And so that's a little side bit, I think that we need to address. We've surveyed the community many times over the years about what do they want to see in terms of retail opportunities. One that comes up regularly is a bookstore / art supply store, of which we have one on campus that nobody feels free to access because they can't park without getting a ticket. I spoke with 2 university presidents about a satellite office downtown. No luck. These are the kind of things where we can work more closely with our university, I think, and see if people in this town don't have Western Oregon University apparel because it's not easily accessible. When Bimart finally started carrying it, you know, more folks are supporting, you know, visibly supporting Western now. We need to really get after that connection with the university and say, here are the things we can do for you, helping to attract and retain students, for example, by building out a business community that is attractive to students. I've talked to a couple of business owners on Main Street who say, I don't particularly, you know, see that many students come in. And at least one with an attitude of didn't care if they did. That is not helpful to the university. It's not helpful to our business community. And we really need to build that bridge between the city and the university. This is what we can do to you to help what you're trying to do. Here's some things you might think about doing with us, you know, to help us accomplish these things. Yeah.
I just heard several times in the conversations tonight, and I agree with a lot of things that have been said, is that we are still looking at the people that may either live here or want to live here as families. There are a lot more individuals than families. There are the single people, that are maybe never going to be married. There are young couples. So I think we need to open that thought process a little bit and realize that the services that we bring in and the industries that we bring in, it's not just a family wage. It's a single person's wage also that might want to buy a house and want to, you know, live, eat, shop, everything here in Monmouth.
Share one thought that I've seen grow in different places where you have a lot of people working from home, but then they also need maybe a place where they can go and rent a space for meetings, or a lot of the kids are doing gaming or electronics where they want to go and have a soundproof room or some video capabilities and the high-speed internet, and where places where you could, if you're working from home, you could go to an office and rent it for a day or several hours if you're in some important meetings or different things. And so like one of my nephews was here from Washington for a while, and he looked around for some place where he could just rent for like a month while he was going to be living here, and he couldn't find anything worth. And so, yeah. Oh, okay. Maybe it was too high of whatever he was looking for. But yeah, so little places that you could book like for hours or for weeks in advance, and then also for group meeting locations where you could pull a group together and have a good place that can be hosted, and I don't know, with any type of amenities and things like that for larger group meetings, and pull your team from your local offices or the school to have a outsourced meeting. But I don't know, I'm sure there's lots of ideas out there.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilor Belts, you had a really great idea in healthcare. It made me remember I was talking to a resident a couple of weeks ago, and there seems to be a really huge need in caretakers for folks with dementia. The person that I talked with said I don't know that she even really found anybody. She said it was, and she checked everywhere. And if there are services, then maybe what we need to do is figure out a service to connect people with the service. But I think that would be a huge benefit just in that area. And probably I'd be the first customer here, so it's
I think Councilor Lopez has a comment. Is that a hand?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Howard.
Yes, both. So a couple thoughts, and I too love the robust conversation that's occurring. I think, you know, we've talked a little bit about terminology, right? So is this a family wage? Is this an individual wage? I think to be able to move forward knowing or with some kind of training on how we should be considering these, what, you know, the best practices that are in, you know, applying certain terms. I'm one of the individuals that used family wage earlier tonight, and that wasn't meant to as a limiting comment. It was meant to suggest that there's a living wage that's maybe scraping by, and then a living wage that you could thrive in. And so I don't know how best to voice that, but as we go further down this path, I'm sure some of that will pick up. But a glossary of terms or something to point us in the right direction. I know that in social services, certain terms come in and out of fashion as time goes by. And so knowing how we can be conversant in these spaces, I think will make us stronger as a group as well. Touching on Councillor Belt's, I love that looking at what's growing and jumping on the bandwagon, because Monmouth isn't going to pull a Amazon's third headquarters or anything along those lines, an Apple campus. But we might be able to pull in a small tech firm like Microtech, who has offices in Corvallis and Vancouver. We might be able to pull in healthcare providers. Those types of things are fantastic. As we weigh that, I'd suggest that we also, because we're looking at this on a fairly far time horizon, also look at which jobs are highest at risk for replacement by AI. We look over the next 20 years, that's going to be a significant, create a significant shift in job markets. And things like service industry, healthcare, education, and then creative spaces are highly resistant to AI. Jobs like manufacturing, things that a lot of people think of, oh, well, what kind of industry can we pull in? Manufacturing, those are actually highly at risk of AI. Driving, I think, as an example, I don't know that they've cracked that nut yet for driverless taxis, but they're getting close. So looking at the best information that we have right now, and not just where it is now, but also where that opportunity is in the future as the landscape begins to shift, I think will put us in a strong position.
Commissioner Howard.
Thanks. Yeah, my comment is probably more for the strategies portion of this whole process, which is, and I'm not saying this to start a fight with anybody's ideas of what sort of businesses we want in town, because I like a lot of those ideas, but I think we have to ask the question that the businesses are going to ask, which is, why set up shop in Monmouth instead of Corvallis, instead of Salem, instead of Dallas? I mean, what are we selling them on? Is it the talent pool? Is it the customer base? Is it the infrastructure? We have to make the case that it's worth their while to set up here instead of somewhere else nearby, where they can have access to our talent pool. They can have access to our customer base, because small towns like ours are used to driving 30 minutes for a service or 30 minutes for employment. I don't like having to ask those questions, but I know they will. And so part of our strategy for bringing in new business needs to be having compelling answers for those questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. I really appreciate all the ideas and comments and strategies that have been shared. I think they can tie in really well together. My idea is probably not going to be very popular, but like a Amazon distribution center, they pay over minimum wage. They offer tuition waiver. So nursing students could work at Amazon, get their education paid for, and then work at the clinic that we build here. I don't know, it all ties in together, and we keep them. So I'm only saying that because I know that Chemeketa is working with Amazon and actually has some courses, some certificates, a space that they can train. And what Commissioner Howard was saying, I mean, we have talent here at the college. We have people who can train and work. And I mean, and that was one of the things that was central with Amazon to convince them to work with Chemeketa and have like a training or a little center there in Salem. So what Commissioner Howard was bringing up is very important. Those are, questions we have to answer. And I think we do have so much to offer, and maybe we just need to brainstorm more. Maybe we need to talk to other partners. What are your needs? What do you see? What are students saying that they need or reasons that they would stay? What are our residents hoping for? And maybe they do want to train up to do something else. But so thinking kind of that full circle, because if we could provide all of that, a place to work, a living wage, education, training, and then reasons to stay, that would be pretty amazing, I think, for our community. So
Kind of building on what Rebecca is saying, the idea of tiers. Here are the tiers. We see it a lot on social media. You see kids saying, or somebody says, I'm 16, I'm looking for work, it'll be my first job, or some parent says, my son needs a first job. So if we actually capture what are the tiers of employment, what are the tiers of housing, what are the tiers in which people need to progress so that they can stay. And maybe if we don't have a Amazon distribution center, but we have the relationship where we know we can tell somebody, here's a great opportunity for you to work here. You're in school, you're working here, but we want you to stay in town. So we'll help you with efficient, cost-effective, timely transportation, perhaps a commuter transportation system to get people to and from Salem quickly, if that's where the big jobs are. Do you know what I mean? So, because we're never going to have, I don't think we'll ever have something that big, but let's talk about what the tiers of employment could be for somebody so that we can help them stay here, whether it's a single or a family or an unconventional relationship, however you want to put that, blended family. Let's make it so people can stay.
Well, I'm going to make a comment because I have the microphone.
You're in charge.
I spent 40 plus years of my career in healthcare planning and administration. And the drivers and healthcare definitely is a factor that takes people out of small towns. Absolutely. And the factors you need to look at is one, who's paying for the healthcare? So who is the insurer for the college? And how are they influencing where people go to care? You look at convenience. Is it convenient? Are there the services available? And then you look at perceptions of quality. And all of those things are hard to influence because large employers, whether they're public employers or private employers, are driven by what's the cost of health insurance and how can I get an affordable health plan for my employees. And that it doesn't always think about how can I have an affordable health plan that will keep people in town. Even if there are services available, they still will be driven out of town. And the other thing that's important in healthcare is who are the big providers. Here it's basically Samaritan in Corvallis, Salem Health in Salem, and Kaiser is also a big provider because they're also, private, provide insurance and also provide healthcare. And all three of those, to some extent, drive people out of town because they want you to come to the services that are close to them. But if we're looking to have more services here, that's the kind of connections we need to look at, is who are the big providers and how can they, what's the incentive for them to keep people in town? So, there's a lot of factors that could be considered in that. But on the other hand, those are generally healthcare jobs are good paying jobs with benefits and whatnot that do keep people employed well. So now,
I'll just throw in on that because I have been in several meetings, mostly with Mayor McArdle from various health providers and health systems, and they've identified our needs. They just can't afford to add them to our community because they have them in Dallas or they have them in Salem, and that is deemed close enough. So just so you know, we are what they would like to eventually provide is urgent care and physical therapy. Those are two things that are seen as needed in our community, which is interesting, right? Especially, and one of the reasons Western Oregon is starting its Doctorate of Physical Therapy program this fall. So there will be, their programs in Salem, but we will be have a tie to some of those services, just to focus on that one industry.
yeah, physical therapy there's a shortage of physical therapists, and it's now a PhD driven program. To be a licensed physical therapist, you now need a doctorate. So that just tightens the supply down even more. Yeah.
We have 2 facilities that offer physical therapy here in town. I know because I'm going through one of them now. So,
John?
I sit on the West Valley Hospital Foundation board, and I too have had this conversation. And Dallas has a same-day clinic. They have 2 urgent care facilities. They have an emergency room. We don't have any of those things. And every chance I get, I say to my Salem health people, and still nothing. So you know, it is a problem that we all have to leave town for urgent care. And how we get that facility here, I'm not exactly sure, other than continuing to be a squeaky wheel.
Healthcare facilities are extremely expensive to build not to build, but to staff. They're extremely expensive to staff, and that's why they're limited.
I think one of the opportunities we have is to not always have to figure this all out ourselves, but to go reach out to communities have already figured it out. And I think that if we did more of that, I mean, I think of Sweet Home, they have an urgent care now. Sweet Home, they figured it out. I mean, as they know that they're growing and their population and developers are coming and that type of thing, both Lebanon and Sweet Home and some of these outlying rural areas, they have bridged that. And I think that we can reach out and learn so much from our neighboring communities. We're missing out if we're not.
Let me sort of piggyback on a couple of comments relative to the healthcare industry and how it could serve the needs that we have here. We have a facility in Monmouth called Total Health, which is part of the Northwest Human Services family. And they have a clinic. I mean, their main clinic is on Edgewater in Salem, and but they have this satellite out here, and they can't afford to do it quite yet, but they have an interest in expanding out here. They recognize they serve a type of population that we have, which is typically Medicare, Medicaid, low income folks. That's kind of their clientele. And they have an interest out here in expanding. The property they're on is there's land to expand the building. And, you know, so if we could look in, I wouldn't say internally, I love that we're looking outside and looking to expand, but I don't think we ought to just jump right over the top of expanding current building or current businesses that we have and making that attractive for those businesses to do so, and particularly in the growth piece of that. I mean, Northwest Human Services has urgent care. They have that at the Edgewater Clinic, but that, could be transferable out to here. They have docs and they have all of the people that go along with it, and it is convenient. So we're not going to get a hospital here, but we might be able to expand what we have. And sort of along those lines, the other asset that we have not really mentioned, and that's the trolley. And there's really been, to my knowledge, no comprehensive marketing plan, business marketing plan. The businesses along that trolley line have not coalesced to develop a plan to, bring visitors and riders from Independence over here and riders from here down to there. And I think that's an opportunity that creates a vibrance, that creates movement, that creates, a revenue that I think would be beneficial to all of our businesses. One of the things that our consultants are going to find is that we are very strapped and very short of space. A lot of these things are damn good ideas. We got nowhere to put them. And so either we rehab the facilities that we have, or find a way to do that, not us, but they become better, or we find different places to put them. Because we do not have the type of available inventory to be able to meet a tenth of the needs that ideas we've had. So that's just a challenge out in front of us. So we need to go get. I mean, it's not a barrier necessarily, temporarily, but not forever. Okay, enough.
Commissioner, Councilor Lopez.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for entertaining my continued comments here. One thing that I want to make certain finds its way into, some version of the finished product here is when we're looking at how we present ourselves to businesses. We've talked a lot about assets that Monmouth has, and Councillor Carey just touched on, a shared asset, the trolley with and the vibrance that lends. I do think that we need that it would benefit us to, learn how to speak to prospective businesses through the, two cities, one community lens. If you look at, us demographically on paper, right? If you were to cite a hospital, you're going to put it in Dallas, and that's where it is. I don't know exactly how many people live in Dallas. Memory serves that it's roughly 17,000. And so compared to Monmouth and Independence, that's the biggest population center. However, if you look at us as one community here, we're two cities, but we're, smushed right up next to each other. We're 22,000 together. And I think there's certainly a benefit to that. There's the power of larger numbers, larger markets, right? And so if you look at Polk County as a whole, what's the population center? I would suggest that the population center of Polk County, I mean, someone could look at it and say, well, West Salem. Right? I'm going to lump that in with Salem. Everyone in West Salem is going to Salem anyway. Okay, what's the rest of it? Dallas. Well, I'd say no. It's actually Monmouth Independence. And, I think that would or could resonate with, entrepreneurs and existing businesses looking to expand alike. I also like the idea of reaching inward to some of or businesses that are here. I haven't heard mention yet of our newest medical office, Small Town Pediatrics, right there on the S curve. They moved in this year. And so gaining some insights from businesses that have recently sited here might inform what made us attractive to them, and how we could further attract more businesses like them. So just a couple ideas to throw against the wall.
Go ahead.
I have one I have one other maybe asset, and I think I may have talked about this when we were doing the economic development strategy, but the university has a career center basically. So one thing I thought about was asking the director, who lives here in town, who just joined our Arts and Culture Commission, not our Economic Opportunity Analysis group, but who are the employers recruiting Western students? When they have job fairs, who shows up? When they have postings, who are the employers that are looking at those students? And what are some connections we might make there to let those folks know that if they if they're looking to relocate, maybe we would have a great opportunity for them to be connected closer to the students they recruit.
Adri Clark. Yeah, she's on our pack. We'll put her on the spot in the next pack meeting.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just have one last thing to say. I told my daughters that I was coming to this joint planning and, about economic development. And they say, can you please mention that young people would like to work in their town, because traveling to Salem or Corvallis or somewhere else is tough on the gas budget, on the car, on time, especially when we go to school. So if you could just mention that, and just so they know that a lot of kids in town, or middle schoolers, high schoolers, they don't even know what's available in Monmouth Independence as far as careers. And some of us would like to stay, but we don't even know what's available. So any type of job shadows, internship, apprenticeships, anything that we could maybe attract our younger folks. I mean, even middle schoolers to start thinking about staying here, high schoolers staying here and going to school here and investing in our community. I don't know, but they wanted me to mention it, and I don't want to get a hard time when I get home.
To follow on that, this ran through my head earlier. We were talking about family wage jobs and, finding places for the students when they graduate and so on. The students who are at Western right now, they're almost all working to cover their college expenses. Do we have jobs in this community for those Western students? If not, can we put on our list of fun things to do with this activity those entry-level jobs that give students the part-time get through college, and to go ahead and take it down a notch, the high school kids too would also appreciate those kind of jobs. We have a few, we've got a couple of burger joints. I guess that supplies a few of those jobs, but we could use a whole lot more.
If they can't all work it.
They could try.
Yeah, and I like what you had mentioned earlier with some of those like welding or construction or mechanics and HVAC and all of those type of internships, and like they could get connected or have sites where they can get trained.
So are we ready to talk about next steps?
Yeah,
That's the next item on the
good
agenda,
segue. I told him it'd be an hour.
That's good. I definitely didn't want to cut off that discussion. That was great. But yes, why don't we move on and talk a little bit about next steps? So we have the public survey. We are trying to get more responses for that. Staff there can tell you a little bit more about how to pass on the word about that and get people connected to it. But please do spread the word. We'd like people to give feedback into this process to the greatest extent possible. So we are finishing up draft materials. We're going to talk to the advisory committee meeting next week, and we'll actually have some more of the draft analysis and numbers to talk with them about. But we will also be coming back to chat with you guys about those interim products and start sharing some of the findings with you. Again, that's probably will be closer towards the end of the year, November, December, but we'll have lots to talk about at that time, and also some initial ideas for strategies and tools. So that's where we're at in the process. Excuse me. That's where we're at in the process, and so that's all that I have. I say thanks to all of you for this great discussion. I've been scratching down notes as quick as I can. And if you have any more comments or thoughts that you think we should have, please do send that on to the city. You can send it on to us. And please do also take the survey yourself if you have not done that. So I think that's what I have to say, and I'll turn it back over to Suzanne.
Thank you so much for your input. So any other?
Yeah, no, I think Brendan's summed it up really well, and I just echo the thank you for such a vibrant and fruitful conversation. I think I was also scribbling as fast as I could. Some really good ideas came out of this, and I think it's going to make a good segue of the things you were talking about, land inventory, job growth trends. We're going to get into that more in our next work session. So stay tuned for that. And the survey link, really easy to access. Just go to our main page of our city website, and there's under the news articles, latest news, there's a link to it right there. So, and then if folks feel more comfortable with a paper copy or Spanish, there is also a Spanish version of that as well, translated version of the survey. But if they'd like a paper copy, you can just send them our way, and we'll make sure that they get hooked up with the paper survey as well. It's open until September 20th. Little incentive. We'll have a drawing for a gift card to a local business, a gift certificate. So trying to incentivize people's time. It's really busy, but yeah. So just thank you for all your great conversation.
So is there any development report?
Just real briefly for the Planning Commission, we do have business to attend to at our next regular scheduled meeting. That's Wednesday, October 2nd. We'll have a sign variance application to review that night. So keep that meeting date on your calendar, please, if you can.
Okay. There's nothing else. Are we ready to adjourn?
We adjourn.
I can't move your turn.
Sure.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.